All right, everybody, welcome to episode 20 of Diary of a Sales Engineer. We have a very, very special episode today. It is our 1 year anniversary. It is episode 20, and we have a very special guest on with us, Arvi Carkanji. And I believe I got it right and I nailed it.
You did.
I was going to do episode 20, but I think it might be backwards. I don't know if it's this way or that way. I'm not sure. But I did it anyways. So one of them had to have been right inherently. But we have a very, very exciting episode. I will go ahead and kick it over to Samir. But before I do that, a special, special treat. At the end of today's episode, we are going to be trying a brand new segment. So stay tuned for the end, and we will announce it later on.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Samir Sahai Kosser here, here to introduce Arvi. She is the founder of Elite Talent and a specialist in pre-sales and post-sales hiring. She helps SaaS companies find top-tier talent. She started the firm because she was seeing how misunderstood and undervalued these roles were, and she knew there had to be a better way to match great people with great companies. Her goal is to guide hiring teams to make better decisions when hiring pre-sales talent, as well as help talent step into roles that they truly match their potential. So reading that, when I first read that, the first thing that came to mind to me, RV, is what did you see that people were misunderstanding in the hiring process and the recruiting process of SCs for you to go and create Elite Talent in the first place?
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited to be here for the invite and, of course, in a special episode. And you just shared with me it's almost your 1 year anniversary, so congrats on that. What you guys are doing is pretty awesome. Um, but in terms of pre-sales, so really what happened originally was I had a cousin and she was actually looking for a role in sales engineering. And kind of like a lot of you guys before getting into sales engineering, you probably didn't even know what it was. And that was me too. And obviously I had the experience in recruiting. So she reached out to me to help her. And I was like, sure. So we'll start with specialists in recruiting first, kind of reach out to companies and see, who specializes in these roles, and then reach out to companies, etc. And then we kept reaching out to recruiting companies, and I started realizing nobody understood. Not that they didn't understand, actually, I take that back, but nobody really specialized in pre-sales. And the entire feedback we were getting was that, yeah, we'll do like one or two of those roles a year. And I was like, wow, that's like, so I was asking her, I was like, how come like you're even in this role? Like there's barely any opportunities out there. And she was like, no. It's just that people don't really understand it. So then we start looking into it. Obviously, I go on LinkedIn. I look at all these companies that have listed their roles. We reach out to companies. And I was just curiously asking questions like, why are you guys not working with recruiting companies? And they were like, well, they don't really understand this role. So we outsource everything else but this. So at that point is where I really started realizing, I was like, wow, this is a huge gap. And the fact that there's barely, pretty much close to zero, unless I just, didn't find any, at least up to this point, nobody really specialized in pre-sales. It didn't really understand what it takes to be in pre-sales, like a sales engineer, solutions architect, and things like that. So ever since then, I started really diving deep into the role, understanding it, spent a lot of time with her, understanding what she does and how she does it, and just kind of looking at all the misconceptions that people have about this role and recruiters and then companies. And that's kind of like how my company was born.
Can I ask you a question that has been burning on my brain, which
Oh,
is
God.
how do you handle all the different titles as they are similar, but they're not
Love that.
necessarily the same thing?
Yeah. Um, it really depends on the company. So, like, honestly, the first thing I do when I talk, well, I guess talent too. Like, the first thing I do when I talk to talent or the company is I have them define the role. I'm like, yes, I see it's a sales engineer. What do they actually do? Or, hey, I know it's a solution consultant. What do they actually do? Because everybody will call it differently. And just now, kind of started a new trend where sales engineers are starting to be called go to market engineers. So kind of navigating that new title there as well. But yeah, that's pretty much the best way to do it right now.
Yeah, that makes complete sense because even in my role, I've been an SC at four different companies with four different titles. It's,
Right, right. And the thing is, sometimes the SE role, depending on the company and where you're at, it's going to be a mixture of not just strictly like pre-sales demo. Like it could be actually outreaching, like cold call outreaching. It could be post-sales too. So it's always about defining what the company and then what the talent has done in those roles so that we can help match them the right way.
I can tell you, even for myself, having just gone through the hiring process, I don't know, like 8, 9 months ago, where I was actively interviewing with different companies. And during that process, like it's extraordinarily hard because there would be so many companies I would talk to. And while they might list the role of solution consultant or sales engineer or solution engineer or whatever
Yeah.
it is, right? There's 100 different ways that they name this role. And sometimes I would talk to them and they would be looking truly for an engineer, right? And I would have to have that conversation. Well, you hold on, I'm not an engineer that can do some business. I'm more a business go
Yeah.
to market strategist that can do some of the engineering work that is required. But there's a big misconception there. And I think that's one of the hardest things because I would read up on roles, say, oh, wow, this is really exciting. It seems like based on the job description, this is a good fit. But then I'd get 2, 3 interviews down the road and I'd be talking to someone like, no, we actually need you to deploy, do this and this. And I'm like, oh, hold on. Like, those are in the skill set, but it's not my
Yeah.
primary skill set that I want to explore. Right. And so then I would have to basically put the brakes on the interview process and move on to the next thing. And it takes time to find the right role that actually fits your needs of what you're looking for. And the job descriptions themselves aren't necessarily the best indicators of it. So I like that you do the outreach to basically find and say, hold on, what is it that you're actually looking for? It would have saved me a bunch of.
Yeah.
So curious
I
to,
agree. And that's why I said I always have them define it.
and when you're having
Go
like,
ahead, Samir.
yeah, when you're working with these companies, I think there's like two sides of this coin. You have your talent side, and then you have the actual company side. So if we just look at the company side, when they are like defining the, for all intents and purposes, we're going to call it the sales engineering role. Like, do you ever have to push back on them saying, hey, actually, like we're venturing into a different role, or hey, actually, like this is beyond the scope of what one person does, or are they pretty good at scoping out the where does it start and where does
Yeah.
it end?
Yeah, great question. So honestly, it will really depend on the type of company, how big they are, what their product is, and what kind of funding they're in need of, et cetera. So really when it comes to like how the companies define it is, and actually I was working with a company right now, they were looking for a founding SE role. And honestly, the founding SE is not even the right title because they're doing anything from outreach to sales to post sales. So it's more like a unicorn role per se, which, it comes, I think, why it's so hard for recruiting companies or even companies to really work together because nobody really understands and there's no common like conception of like what the role does. So each company is going to be completely different. And it's not necessarily that I push back on like what they're asking. What I really do is I make sure that when I'm talking to the talent, they understand all the intricacies of what the role does. And then I'll get, for example, talent say, yeah, you know what, I like this part of the role, but I don't like this. So I don't think that's for me. So that's, where the alignment comes in place and making sure that that's why I said like defining the role first is super important, and then go into talent and the candidates, and just being completely honest about what the role is. Because the last thing you want to do is getting somebody in a role that they're not going to enjoy and they feel deceived and, oh, I didn't know about this part beforehand. You didn't tell me. So the biggest thing that I push back on when it comes to talking to companies is making sure I understand all the details of what the role will entail. And the only thing I can do from there is making sure that the talent, when I'm talking to them, they understand everything that goes into it. And then obviously they can decide for themselves whether they like it or not.
What's the most common things that you hear from sales engineers of the job description that they actually give you the breaks and say, you know what, that's actually not.
The most common things I would say is when it starts mixing it with post sales and like customer success. I've come to notice that a lot of talent and candidates, they don't love that part. So I can see you guys shaking your head. So
We don't.
I would assume that's right.
Samir and I
Yeah.
both have strong
So
thoughts
that
on
I
that.
would say. I love that. I'd love to hear some of those thoughts. But yeah, that would be the biggest thing of where talent kind of starts getting a little bit more kind of like, oh, I need to think about that. I'm not sure that's for me.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thoughts on it, right? Is that sales engineers are some of the most highly equipped people at a company that can help influence revenue. So, why would we want to take
Hmm.
some of the people with the best skill set to influence revenue in a positive way and have them be repurposed towards doing things that aren't necessarily revenue generating? That's like my
Yeah.
biggest thing is that SEs have that skill set to go and do that. I wouldn't want to distract them if I was a GTM leader. I would want all of my SEs deployed, doing strategy, working on how to win deals more effectively, building good materials. I think that's like a side note of like something SEs I found to be are incredible at is building super good materials. The amount of times I work with
Yep.
other SEs and they actually produce materials that I'm like, did you get this from marketing? It's like, no, I built that. Like I built that because it makes sense to me to present it that way. And I'm like, wow, this is a slam dunk. And next thing you know, everyone at the company is using it. So I wouldn't necessarily want to distract them with those. And I think that's why you see like a very candid pushback from SEs because they know they're better off generating revenue. And also, too, like the customer support side is really an entirely different role that requires somebody else and a different sort of skill set, somebody that knows how to check in. I do think that's changing overall, like in the landscape of SaaS, especially as the way SaaS is being deployed. I think we'll see more things like technical account managers, we'll have AI
Yeah.
specialists, we'll have your true traditional like customer support, customer success, but they'll be tied into more like outcome driven metrics and things of that nature. I think that landscape is starting to shift quite a bit, but I still think like there are special skill sets required for that. And honestly, I love the idea of a technical account manager, somebody that is basically an SE, but an SE more focused towards CS and generating
Hmm.
revenue on top for upsells, right? Like that's the important piece on the technical account manager is like they're focused on the upsell, keeping customers happy, et cetera. Right? It's not just like deploying, implementing, getting someone happy. It's keeping them happy, making them do renewals, making them do upsells. That's why I think that's a really interesting role. And do know that there are some top SaaS contenders out there that do have that technical account manager role.
And to add to
Yeah.
Ryan, the
I agree. And I was just,
yeah, go ahead. We got a little bit of a lag
I
here
was
on
just
my
going to
end.
add on my end that at the end of the day, you guys, I know. At the end of the day, the SE role is also um, it's also based on commission. So like when, and I understand why you guys would push back because at the end of the day, when you're doing customer success management, you're you're not getting paid for that, especially on the commission side, right? So you want to make sure your focus is on revenue generating, not just for the company, but also yourself too. So I totally get, obviously that other side of why you don't want to do that part as well.
Yeah, and I will add the skill sets are completely different. As an SC, we are building the art of the possible, and we're telling the story around the product, and not building, bulletproof implementation level things. So when you
Yeah.
take an SC and you put them in implementation, and all of a sudden you have to think of all these edge cases, it's just not a muscle that we flex often, and it's nor should we be thinking that way. We have to think, how do we get them in the door? How do we show them that it's possible in such a way that we're setting up implementation for success, because we know what is possible, what is not possible within the product, and then implementation can really bang it out and make sure that all those edge cases and those nitty gritty fine details are taken care of. Uh,
Yeah.
but I want to ask now from the other side, from like the talent side. Uh, a lot of people are trying to break into this role and are starting to become more and more familiar with it. I saw your post recently of, I want kids to say I want to be a sales engineer when I grow up. Uh,
Hmm.
so like, what are you noticing of the trend of more people finding out, and like how are they finding out when you're speaking to new talent?
Yeah, honestly, right now I would say it's still not, it kind of sounds stupid to say, but like it's still not public as a role. A lot of talent is still just finding out through working in companies. And then obviously they have a department for a season. They're like, oh, what's that? Let me see if I can do that. Or they're or find out from a friend or like just communication, etc. So that's really how I've seen most talents still find it. And that's definitely one of my goals, is to make it as public as possible. Um, and just obviously seeing what happens from there.
I don't know who coined it, but somebody did coin this, saying that sales engineering is the best role no one's ever heard of. And I typically agree with the
I
sentiment.
think I saw that. Yeah.
But
So,
it's hard. Like, you don't, there's no course in college that is on sales engineering. There is no
yeah.
degree on it. There is not even like a real public knowledge of this particular role.
Yeah.
And I do think, one of the things that we really set out as we started this, we're 1 year in, it's amazing to me, right? Like, the whole purpose of why we did this was, one, we wanted to help out people looking to break into sales engineering. We both struggled with it. We both wanted to help out individuals. And the amount of times that I get feedback from people saying, your podcast helps me, it makes it all worth it, right? And then the second piece is something that you've said to me that has resonated with me ever since. I want to go sit down at the dinner table with my mom, and she knows exactly what it is, what I do. I like that, right? Like, if you're an accountant, a
Yeah.
lawyer, you sit down at dinner, people know what you do. When
Yeah.
people talk to me about it, right, I have to know exactly what I want to say, how I want to say it, what's the setting, how deep do they want to go on it, what I do. And typically I'll give them like the short and sweet, like, I'm in technical sales, right? Like, that's where it will start and end. But I would love for people to actually know the
Yeah.
intricacies of what we do, because there's a lot of cool stuff that sales engineers get to do. You get to problem solve, you get to do demos, you get to interact with customers, you get to drive revenue, and ultimately you get to have some fun along the way. So it's an awesome, awesome role. And I think, I speak on behalf of both of us when I say we appreciate the support to make this a household
Yeah.
role.
I love that for sure. I'll add this too. Sometimes you'll see, or I've seen at least companies that, especially founders or startups, like pre-seed funding and things like that, where they're not even aware what sales engineering is at that point until they really start needing it. And they're like, I wish there was somebody that can do both. And then they realize that there is somebody that can do both sides. So.
So when it comes to guiding your talent and understanding what they need, what are the gaps that you see when people come and work with you in order for them to actually like break in and land a job? Thinking some like actionable things that folks who are in the process right now can take away and tweak their approach.
So really there's two sides to this. And I think it depends on the background that you're coming from. You got the people that are technical background, like software developers and things like that, where they come into and they're like, yeah, I like the SE role, I want to get into it. And then you have the side of salespeople that realize that there's a mixture of like technicality and sales, and they like the technical side, not strictly just sales. So I think there's two answers for two different, types of backgrounds. When it comes to the background with the technical side, I think it's a little bit easier for them to get into the role. And the main reason for that is because most companies are willing to teach the soft skills, like the sales skills, the communication, et cetera. Now, they still have to have some sort of business acumen. It can't just be like a complete no understanding of it whatsoever. But most companies are willing to teach that because they have the hardest part, which is the technical side. Versus on a sales role, like if you're coming from a sales background, I would say your options are going to be a little bit more limited in the sense that the company will not require like a heavy technical background. So for those folks, it's a little bit harder to get into because they have to learn some of the technicalities. And again, not every company is going to require that, because there's plenty of companies that will just say, hey, we don't need any technical. It's kind of more like a solutions consulting, and you don't need to have that. For those folks that come from the sales type background or account executive and, SDRs and things like that, I would recommend that they go after bigger companies, more established companies, because those types of companies have a pretty much build out onboarding. They'll hold your hand. They'll teach you how to, certain things, whether it's technical or sales. So for those folks, I always recommend to start with a more established company versus the people from the background with, technical side, I think they can go either way. I think they can plug in very well into like a startup as long as they understand, obviously, you're going to be wearing multiple hats. And usually they're more comfortable with that. And they can also go into, kind of like the established companies where they still teach them and hold their hand, etc. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I would say there's two different ways to kind of come into it, and that's how I would recommend you do it.
You gave me an interesting thought here. And Samir, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think's harder? Do you think the technical skills are harder or the soft skills?
Oh man,
If you say it depends, I'll end the podcast. We're done at 1 year. Not an answer. Not an answer. You got to just pick one.
I think it reminds me of like skiing versus snowboarding, where getting good at snowboarding is harder, or getting proficient at snowboarding is harder than getting proficient at skiing, but getting really, really good at snowboarding is easier than getting really, really good at skiing. So like in that sense, getting proficient at the sales side is easier than getting proficient at the technical side, but it's easier to get extremely advanced at the technical side in comparison to getting really advanced on the sales side. So like the barrier of entry to become like elite versus technical versus sales, like this, getting to an elite sales side is way more harder than, in my opinion, than getting to an elite like technical side. So kind of answer your question, but it's like there's like levels to it. Just like getting to a proficient level, like yes, it's going to be a little bit harder to do the technical side than the sales side, but getting to an elite level, it's harder on the sales side than the technical side.
To everyone listening to the podcast, notice he did not say it depends, but he kind of gave an answer that was like, it depends, right? But look, that's a good skill set to have as an SE. Don't say it depends. It's the worst answer possible. It is so ambiguous and it results in no sort of confidence from the buyer side. But what Samir just did there gave me a lot of confidence here. And I think the way you described it was perfect. Okay. I really do, because I do believe that getting to be great at the soft skills requires so much energy, attention, and effort to do that. Don't get me wrong. Highly complex or technical products do require a huge, huge lift at getting good at. But I do think you have an easier pathway to that versus the soft skills, because the soft skills are just, you have to work at them non-stop. And it's just one of those things that I think is extremely, extremely difficult to be great at. And I do think to be great, you have to really push yourself on continuing to be great at the soft skills. If you're not working on them constantly, your skill set will decline. So I'm not a skier, but I think it's like the black diamonds are the hardest. If you're not working on your skiing, you're not going to the black diamonds once a year, right? Like you have to work your way up there and you have to continue your skills to be able to ski at that level. I would say the same is pretty true for like the soft skills.
Yeah. Agreed. I think depending on the background that you're coming from, obviously this the opposite skill that you need to work the hardest on to make sure that you can nail it.
Are you ever having to, adjust talents, like what they think they like, where they think they belong or where they think they should be going? And, after learning about their background, being like, hey, actually, you should probably look into a company like XYZ because of ABC. Like, do you have to
Yeah.
have those conversations often?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say it's often. And then sometimes it's more like depending if they want my advice or not. There's some people that are really set on what they want. And obviously, nothing I say or do can change their opinion. But usually, when I'm talking to talent or candidates, if they're asking me, hey, like I need some feedback or what do you think is best, for me to do? Or if I'm trying to get into sales engineering, what do you think is the best way to do that? So honestly, like the same way I shared it here is what I would do with them, kind of walk them through the two paths. And then I also give them a little bit of advice on like, what companies they might work better with if they don't have the technical background. Like it could be like MarTech type companies versus like a technical person can kind of plug into most of it. Like I said, it could be MarTech or even like, like all the cybersecurity or anything like that. So they're a little bit more versatile. So depending on the type of talent, then I'll give them that specialized advice. And then again, if they're asking for that feedback as well.
Can I touch base on one thing there? I actually think this is a really good call out, because a lot of times when people reach out to me and say, hey, I want to break into sales engineering, kind of give them like roughly the same spiel of like what it's going to take. But for those that don't have the sort of technical background and you're like wanting to break into sales engineering, the best thing you can do is go get industry certifications. I think that's a great start. Go find SaaS products out there that you're interested in. get those certifications, prove out the technical aspect. That will help get you a foot in the door. Second to that is, are there tools that you use constantly in your role today, or tools that you use outside in your own life? Well, those are some great companies to start looking at, because you already have a lot of technical expertise on how to
Yeah.
actually use the product versus having to go learn something entirely new. So if you're wanting to break into sales engineering and you've never worked with accounting software, going and trying to be an ERP sales engineer is going to be really, really
Yeah.
difficult. Okay. That's going to be a tough one. But if you've done some work in the ad tech space and there are specific ad tech softwares that you've used, great. Go start off at those companies, see if they're hiring for SEs, because then when you apply and you get into that first interview, you can then talk to your experience of actually using the product. So it is a tip that I like to recommend. I find that most people aren't like always listening to that tip too much, but I do think it's like a really good way if you want to break in, like just a piece of advice that I would give.
Yeah. And actually, I forgot to mention this, but one of the other things, you just triggered my thought there, is if they're already working with a company that already has sales engineering department in there or pre-sales overall, I always push them to go and talk to that department manager. Go see if they can even one help out without having an official title, and kind of showcasing themselves that when that open there, or like the open role is there, they should be the first one in line and why they should do that. So yeah, that also is a tip that I give, depending on obviously where they're at in their current life. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get hired somewhere when you already know the people versus
Yeah,
trying to go do it somewhere else
for
and be like,
sure.
I don't know you. I don't know that you have these skills.
Yeah,
Like it's tough. It's frustrating though. It's also very, very frustrating for those wanting to break in. It is the
yeah,
best job no one's ever heard of, but it is one of the hardest jobs to get your foot in the door.
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally, I
And
agree.
to add to your point, if you are working at a company and there is existing sales engineering, and depending on the maturity of the org, they might have onboarding already determined.
Yeah,
So why not ask for those onboarding docs and see what the sales engineers have to learn when they first join the company, and see what gaps you have and what things you should be learning. And again, to
absolutely.
your point, you're getting your name out there. And I think both Ryan and I got into the role because we kept telling people we wanted to get into the role. And eventually somebody heard us and was like, all right, here's your shot. And we were ready for
That's
that.
funny.
Something, another curiosity that I had at the end of last year, I like made a prediction that I think 2025 was going to see an increase of hiring in the pre-sales, sales engineering domain. Being on the recruiting side, can you compare this year to last year? I know we're like 5.5 months in, but what are you seeing trend wise?
Yeah, I love that question. So I will say this in terms of recruiting and job market last year, not just sales engineering, but really across the board was a little bit harder. It really started kind of uptaking like towards the end of 2024, where more roles were coming out and kind of like the market was stabilizing a little bit more. This year has definitely been, I would say, at least a 20% increase compared to the last quarter alone in sales engineering roles. And honestly, one of the biggest things we're seeing now, especially with companies, obviously, you guys have heard of AI, right? So there's a ton of like AI, ML type SC roles coming up as well. So it's definitely one of like kind of like the hottest ones right now as well. So if anybody listening to this and they're like, yeah, I want to get into it, but maybe I don't know what niche to pick, the AI/ML one would be a huge one. And I think that specific niche and that role is just going to keep on increasing because there's literally companies implementing AI every single day. Brand new AI SaaS companies are just keep on coming up. So that specific niche, I think, is just going to really, really grow.
What's one funny story or like one interesting story you have about a candidate going through the process? Like anything jump out to you that you're willing to share with us?
Funny story. I don't know if I really have like a funny story, to be honest. And what was the second part of the question?
Could be interesting, could be funny. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like a hilarious story, but I find that SCs are typically pretty funny. So I was curious if you've ever run into one. Maybe it's just my own take.
No, I mean, honestly, I've had like really good conversations, and it's a lot of like relationship building. Like, even when I haven't been able to place them in a specific role, I've kept in touch with them. Actually, like one of them kind of became my client as they got their own role. So I have, I guess, fun with them in terms of relationship building on the phone, but I don't think I've had any like crazy, like funny stories, at least yet.
Okay, hey, as it comes up, I expect to see some post on it.
I was gonna
Um,
say, and I'm gonna tag you guys
Yes, yes, we want to be the first to know.
for
I have
sure.
a very funny story of something that happened recently to me, but I'm holding off on it. I'm saving it for a later day, so I'm teeing that up for a later podcast. But man, it highlights the reason why you should always ask the reason, why are you looking to do that? We'll tee that up for a later day. So we will
Oh,
spin
now I
back to
want to
that, but
know. You
it was
can't
crazy.
do this.
But we got to keep the people on the edge of their seat waiting to come
I
back for
got you.
episode
Well,
21,
just
22,
tag me at
23.
least when you're willing to
Yes.
share it so I can see it.
Yes, there'll be a whole series on it. It'd be like, wow,
Love that.
I almost didn't ask why, and I could have gotten to hot water and instead got into a very
That's
interesting
funny.
topic of why the question was asked. But good reminder to everyone out there: like objections are happening every day. Always ask
Yeah.
why. I almost didn't. Shout out to my AE for saving me on that one.
Well, Arvi, it's been great having you. Do you have any last words to leave the audience? And where can they find you if they're interested
Yeah.
in working with you?
If you guys are okay, I'll give a couple of like talent tips when it comes to interviewing or even like job applications. I think that's been like a lot of questions that I'm getting for that specifically lately. So if that's okay with you, I'll just share a couple of quick tips on that.
Absolutely, we'd love that.
Um, okay, awesome. So one of the big tips when it comes to just even the application process overall, your resume, especially in this role specifically, like you guys both said and what we've been discussing already, it is a revenue driven role. So I still see a lot of candidates that will just list like responsibilities in their resume or tasks that they got done, and honestly, it does not differentiate them from the other types of applications that we're getting. So it's really important that you really talk about the impact that you gave that company. Whether it was you shortened the sales cycle, whether it was that you increased their ACV, whether it is that you participate in some really big deals that brought the company this much in revenue. Um, so really, really giving out those numbers is what I like to say, and outcomes versus like tasks and responsibilities. I feel like I sound like a broken record of like saying it. And I feel like a lot of people might have heard me already, but it's like I still see it. And I'm like, why are you guys not doing this already? And obviously, we have ChatGPT now that can help us a lot in that. So, like, when you're unsure, you can put your resume through there and say like, hey, this is the impact I have for the company. How would you write this to make sure it's professional but also makes sense for the hiring companies when they see it, or hiring managers. So I would say that's one of the biggest tips when it comes to the resume itself. I always recommend also add a picture, like you are um, really competing with everybody that's out there when they're applying. So your goal for your resume is to get your hiring manager or somebody like me, or the company, just even give you an extra 2 to 3 seconds to look at your resume. And a picture does that because you're like, oh, a human is here. It's not just a PDF file. So now I'm like, okay, it's a human. Let me see what he has to say or what she has to say. And that also helps a lot because for your resume, and I had shared this on my LinkedIn a couple of days ago, we had a role where we had almost 500 applicants for that specific role, and it was a lot to go through. And you're dealing with humans. I don't like to use a ton of AI when it comes to resume looking because they're not there yet to like skip and really find the good talent. So I just found myself like every time I was looking at something and I was like, oh, a picture, let me look at this person's page a little bit more. So those are the two things when it comes to resumes, at least just implementing those. And then when it comes to the application itself, again, you're competing with a lot of people. The job market is kind of stabilizing, but there's still more candidates right now that there is, jobs out there. And like we talked about, a lot of people are looking to even get into this industry. Make sure that you're reaching out to the hiring manager or the recruiter. I've had people that reach out to me and I've forgotten to respond, and then 2 to 3 days later they're like, hey, I'm still here. Did you take a look at my stuff? And I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm so sorry. I was like, actually, you know what? You're a great candidate. I'm going to put you through. So just kind of doing those follow-ups, right? And also showcases a little bit of your skill set there as well, because obviously it's, mixed in sales. So I would say those are three little tips that you can implement. And I know that it can be frustrating for talent. I've heard stories of people applying to over 200 jobs and getting, no callbacks. The one thing I say to that is, instead of applying to 200 jobs, figure out like 10 or 50 companies that you really want to work for, or are kind of like your top or your top companies that you would want to work for. You like their mission, you like their product, and follow up with those instead of applying blindly to like 200 plus companies, because it's not going to do you any favor. And then you're just burning out because now you're like, oh my gosh, I made all these applications, nobody wants me. And you start taking it personally, because we're human beings. At the end of the day, we're going to take everything personally. So I would say more research versus like blindly applying to everything that you can. So those are my little tips. Hopefully they're helpful for anybody listening to this.
Thank you so much for sharing the tips with us. I actually have like a couple of questions that are like burning on my mind, things I've always thought about. Okay.
Yes.
Number one, how long should a resume be? 1 page, 2 page, 3 page? Doesn't matter.
Um, well, I will say up to 2 pages is usually a pretty good length. What I've seen some really good resumes is, what they'll do is, if they have a really long history of working, they will kind of pass, like at the last of the page two, they will just list the titles because they're not relevant anymore. So honestly, anything past like 5 years, let's say, of your experience, you would condense that, and then a recruiter or a hiring manager can ask more questions. But I would say the first 5 years or the last 5 years of your experience are the most important ones. And then anything above that, you would just kind of cut it down to just the title and the company that you worked for. And I mean, I don't see anything wrong with going up to 3 pages, but anything more than that, it's honestly probably just not going to get seen, because you're trying to go through these things as fast as you can.
Okay. Question two. My wife and I had a hot topic of debate before on this, to include or to not include your college GPA on the resume. Now, I've been out of college for a long time, so I don't know how pertinent it is, but thoughts on the GPA still being on?
I'm gonna be in hot water here. Which one was what was your wife leaning towards? I think I'm gonna answer on that end.
She said no. She's like, get rid of the GPA, throw it out. And I was like, man, I worked really hard for this thing.
I'm on the no GPA side,
That's so
but
funny.
that's because my
Yeah.
GPA wasn't that great, so that's a personal problem.
All right.
So
Question. Okay. Tell me.
the answer to that is, I know you're not gonna like this, but depends on your experience and where you are currently in your journey of experience. So if you're just a recent grad, or you maybe have 1 to 2 years of sales engineering specifically because you just graduated and you went straight to that, if you have a notable GPA, absolutely include it. It will just give us that the understanding of like, okay, they've worked hard. And honestly, it's not like it would really sway our decision one way or another. But I would say you can include that for maybe the first 2 years right out of college. Anything above that, unless you're really proud and you want to keep it in there, you absolutely can. But I don't think it's going to be like an important thing where the recruiter or the hiring manager is going to look at it and they're going to say, wow, I'm going to pick this guy because he had a 4.0.
All right. Fair enough. Final question, because I saw this on a resume from a friend of
So
mine who
kind of
asked me to
both.
look it over. Okay. This was super interesting. The most interesting resume
Yes.
I'd seen. A friend of mine sent me it over to look at. The very bottom of it said hobbies. And he listed out all the different hobbies that he was into. And at first I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of different, right? That's weird. And then I thought to myself, I was like, wait a second, it actually caught my attention, because now I've been on the resume way longer than what I was going to be. Uh, Including some personal facts about you. Like, is that something we should be thinking about doing on our resumes?
I say 100%.
Yes, you absolutely can. And I totally look at those when people include them. It just really humanizes your piece of paper per se that we're looking at. Again, keep in mind, like as myself or other hiring managers are just looking at these constantly, you want to make sure that you're humanizing it as much as possible. Now, don't go crazy and give out, any crazy hobbies. I would say keep it quote unquote somewhat professional still. But it's something I definitely look at.
Very cool. Well, thank you for answering some burning questions for me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, with that, thanks so much for coming on and sharing those valuable insights. We will link all your information in the show notes. For those of you who don't follow Arvi on LinkedIn, definitely give her a follow. She puts a lot of good content out there, entertaining stuff, educational stuff, and very impactful stuff. So highly recommend it.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. One day at a time, we'll make sales engineering a household role.
Yes.
For sure.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
All right, Samir. I got to tell you, I do lean on the GPA thing. And after a long spirited debate at home, I was like, all right, great. And honestly, the only person proud of it was me. And I was like, hey, I worked for this thing. Two, I like the hobbies. I honestly, I really do. It every time I'm looking at resumes, it absolutely catches my eyes. And I do think there's like an aspect of if you have common hobbies, it's something for somebody reading it to just immediately latch onto and say, oh, wow, I like that thing too. I have to speak to this person now. Um, I don't have it on my resume. I don't. Like it's not something that I personally have, but I do think yeah, in the future it's something I probably should have on there because it is always an eye catcher.
Yeah, I've had hobbies on my resume since like college. There's always a section for hobbies, and it always got some type of attention. Even if the rest of them like they didn't read anything else, they're like, oh, tell me about that. I saw on your resume you did X, Y, Z. And the beauty of putting it at the bottom, it also like almost like an indicator for you as the applicant that oh they actually like at least scanned the whole thing to make it to the bottom to see this hobby section, whether they read it or not. But like it's almost like a green flag that if they brought up the hobby's like the last 2 or 3 lines on the resume, that means that they had to at least scan the whole thing. So there's like a duality there. And definitely, I think that humanizing yourself in whatever way you can, it will help you stand out. Uh, but what do you think about the photo on the resume? I've gone back and forth on it. Like, I'm like, I'm iffy on that, but I definitely understand the reasoning of humanizing it, but I don't know why for whatever reason it doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, it does, I'm not a huge fan. I don't have mine on there. I do include my links though. Like I do include a link to my LinkedIn and all those other things. So I do think that's helpful because they can go click on it. They can see who I am. They can see additional information about me. I typically don't include the picture on there, but I've seen really good resumes. I think though what you don't want to do, and maybe we should have asked Arby this question, but like I've seen some resumes where the picture takes up like 60% of the space on page one. And immediately I'm like, no,
Turn it
because
off.
there's no information for me to look at that point. So I'm like, all right, I'm missing all the critical information. I just see a photo. But yeah, I don't know. I guess coin flip for me on that one. Whereas like the GPA, the hobbies, like I would say I would lean more towards doing in most cases. The picture, like I could take it or leave it.
Yeah, yeah, and the GPA only if it's good. Like I had scraped by a 3.0 and I didn't put that in there. I think if you have like a 3.5 or above, it's worth it if you're kind of close near to college. And the only time I would put it after like 5 years out is if it's like a 4.0 or like a 3.9. Like
I think I had a 3 or something, and but I was really proud of it, man. Like I worked to get that, okay? Like, and it was one of the sad things to remove from the resume. Okay, it was a sad day for me because I was like, man, all that hard work towards my degree in geological engineering, which I do nothing with, is all gone. All those hours that I've spent in the library and in the lab rooms, like it's all gone. It's all gone outside of my slight rock collection that I have to um, to remind myself of a previous life of mine. It's all gone away.
I think the other things that were valuable that she picked up on is understanding where you're coming from. Am I a stronger sales side or am I a stronger engineer side? And then using that to determine how you choose your roles. She's absolutely right. If you are someone coming from the AE/SDR domain going into a larger company, because you'll just have more support and be able to lean into that. And honestly, anyone who is trying to break into the role for the first time, getting into a big company who has an like associate SC role where they have an established program, a 6 week, 8 week, 12 week. Some of the large Fortune 500 companies have these 12 week boot camps that you go through as a first time SC, and they're designed for people who are breaking into the role. So those who are trying to get in, like, look into those. And majority of those companies have free trials for their software or a developer's license. And if you're not doing that and you're applying to that company, you're not going to get in.
You're not trying, honestly. Like, let's just call it out. Let's just
Yeah.
say what it is. Because I've had so many of these conversations with individuals, and they come and say, I want to be a sales engineer. Okay, great. Look, the road ahead is going to require work. I don't want to do work. I just want the job. All right, well, hey, it's probably not going to, this role probably isn't for you. Like, if you want it, you have to go and make it happen. And I think that's especially true in a role that just isn't really well known. Go get the certification. Salesforce offers free certifications online. You can learn that product in and out. Whether you use the Salesforce certification or not, you can go to another CRM tool out there or another tool out there in the marketplace and say, yeah, look, I don't have your certification, but I've spent the time and the hours to get theirs, so I'm easily willing to do that for you. It shows your willingness to go learn a product. So I think it's a great idea. Salesforce isn't the only one. They just have like what I would consider to be like a best in class one. It's called Trailhead. It's an unbelievable free product. Like, if you want a job, go spend the time and do it. Can open new doors and avenues for you. Definitely something I'd recommend. If you don't want to put in the work, hey, probably gonna have a hard time breaking in.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the episode, we teased out this new part of the podcast that Ryan and I are eager to start. We mentioned that we both get a bunch of questions on LinkedIn. We love the questions, keep them coming. And the goal is at the end of each segment, we're going to take one of those questions and answer it live here on the pod. So I had gotten a question from Samuel Davis, and his question is actually very relevant to what we're talking about. He asks, I'm really interested in making the transition into sales engineering, but I've been wondering about the best ways to build relevant experience without already being in the role. From your experience, are there any certifications, skills, or side projects that you think will help me stand out to hiring managers?
I just answered it, man. Like that. Look, that's what it is. There are free software is out there. There's also like now more than ever. I want to phrase this up right, but like now more than ever, there are so many different kinds of certifications that you can get. Like YouTube. I was watching a YouTube thing earlier this morning on the model context protocol. I wanted to get some additional insight and information into that. I watched a 20-minute video series. The person who does this video series has like 30 different videos out there on different topics out there in the market. So like you could just go to YouTube and you can start learning things. There are paid ones that you can do. I haven't personally done one of those paid ones. Do your research, find some people that have taken it, get their feedback before you sign up, because I would hate to see some of you go and spend a bunch of money doing those and say, you know what, it wasn't really relevant. They didn't really help me do what I wanted, or they didn't really help me break into sales engineering. They didn't really help me break into the field I wanted to get to. So definitely validate those tools that are going to have a fee before you use them. But now more than ever, you have access to go find it. Go type into an LLM, say, I want to learn about blank. Give me 5 resources that I can utilize. You could probably even say, give me 5 free resources, and you can learn about that topic now more than ever. So I would highly encourage any of you, use the resources at your disposal to go and learn about the thing that you want to break into. And to Arvi's point, be specific. Don't go cast a net to 2,000 companies across 100 different industry verticals. Find 1 or 2 industry verticals that you're really interested in. You know software, or you have additional skills for that industry. Focus on those companies to apply to do outreach to. Don't just go cast a wide net of hundreds of different applications across the board. You're going to be spread way too thin. And then every time you have an interview, you're going to go have to ramp up and learn about that industry. That's going to be quite difficult. It's going to be quite difficult to move past that introductory interview, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would just second everything you just said. That I've always questioned certifications, especially like those paid ones where it's like, oh yeah, I got this certification from XYZ company, but if XYZ company has not placed other people with that cert in jobs that you want, or people who have graduated from that program are not in places that you want to get to, I would definitely think twice before, paying a couple grand for something. And that being said, that should be your last resort. To your point, Ryan, there's so many free resources out there. Salesforce Trailhead is just one of them. I'm pretty sure ServiceNow has something similar. Look at all your big Fortune 500 companies. Like, I'm pretty sure you can get like an AWS certification, like a
Google has them.
Google certification.
Everyone has them. Like there are tons of these out there. You don't have to pay for them in most cases. Some of them you'll have to pay to get the actual certification. In Salesforce, you can go and you can learn for free. You can get badges across all the different trails that they offer. But to get the actual certification, you do have to pay a little bit of money. It's not a ton of money. If you're at a company currently today, you probably have some kind of stipend for additional learning to go get that certification. So that could be a great resource to offset some costs. Or it could just be a great resource to offset some cost of those other tools that are out there. But definitely exercise some caution before going and spending money, and try some of the free stuff out first. Like that would be my biggest recommendation. Make sure you like what you're doing. What you don't want to do is say, you know what, I want to become a cloud security sales engineer. And then you go spend $5,000 on some kind of certification or learning program, and you're 10 hours into it and you're like, I hate cloud security. Like, probably do your research first to make sure, right? Just because you think you might like it, definitely try it out first and make sure that's a path you want to go down before you sink a lot of money into it. So just some high level thoughts on that. But I think there are amazing tools that are out there that you can go learn, and then you can speak to them in the interview process. When you go meet with somebody like Arvi, you go kick off a first interview, you can say, here's what I'm doing today. That's impactful. That's a big, big step forward versus just saying, I'm waiting around for the right job just to want me. I want to work at your company. Here's why. Here's what I'm doing. That's a much more compelling story to tell.
Yeah, and I would also add, the other parts of this question were skills or projects. Something that I don't think very many people do, and it might be a little slept on, is give a demo. Record yourself, give a demo, put it on YouTube, and share that. Hey, like, what's the worst thing that happen? Like, they look at the demo, they don't look at the demo. But having it out there, like, hey, I learned a product, got proficient enough, thought about like a storyline, thought of who this is going to be for, like what's the business value behind it, what am I solving, and then actually delivered a 10-15 minute demo about this in an engaging way. Like that, when creatives are creating their portfolio, they're showing the designs they made. As an SE, we are creatives. We are creators of things. Ryan, you mentioned earlier in this episode that you've seen the like crazy stuff that SEs have made because they needed it that look like it's from marketing. So we are creative. So we should also have a online portfolio, and part of that portfolio can be a recorded demo of one of these free products that are out there that you can just get a developer's license, go learn, understand, and then deliver a message.
I would exercise one little piece of caution because I do think it's an amazing strategy to employ. If you have never done sales engineering or given a demo, go do some outreach on LinkedIn and ask somebody to watch your demo before you send it off to a company. Say, hey, would you mind giving me some feedback? The first demo I ever did is nothing like the demos I do today, is nothing like the demo number 5 or demo number 10 or demo number 20. There were so many things that I was doing in that first ever demonstration that would make me go back, throw my hands over my head. But you might have an SE watch that and say, hey, look, you know what? I think there are some really good skills here, but if you want to up level a little bit more and give yourself a better chance, here's what I would recommend. Even if you do some of those little skills right off the bat, might give you a better chance versus just putting out the very first thing you're ever doing. But if you're an established SE, great idea. Throw it out there. I would recommend though, do like a 3-minute high level overview demo, keep somebody's attention versus like a 15-minute demo. I don't know how many people are sticking 15 minutes, but you could just do like a quick Loom video or something like that. Yeah, definitely interesting ways. I agree with your point. Like, we are creatives by nature. So be creative. I actually saw somebody the other day. Uh, I can't remember if they were an AE or SE, but they had actually posted something about wanting to get into a company, and they actually tagged the company in their post. Went super viral, and I was like, oh, wow, great idea. Like, those are creative solutions to breaking it.
Yeah, you got to figure out ways to cut through the noise, especially when there are more applicants than there are roles. Yeah, there's literally been a couple people that have done that. I remember seeing like this girl do it who made her own marketing intern position, and she like created a video about why you should be a intern for that specific company. And this was like the fourth company or third company she targeted. So like the first 2 or 3 didn't work, but she didn't stop. She like continued to create something very personalized and very specific to that company. So the more you can show that, hey, I want to be here working for your company specifically, not just a company, like your company. These are my top 10 companies. I want to work at each one of them for this reason. And I'm going to show you that reason when I talk. So I'm not just some generic person. I am someone who is already invested. I've already done my research. I think that'll really make an impact.
Well, I think that does it for an exciting episode 20. For the next one, again, as a reminder, please send us questions via LinkedIn. We'll start doing that at the end of the episodes in a sort of AMA fashion. Maybe we'll call it a new terminology. I don't have anything good off the top of my head. I was going to try to riff, but definitely have nothing sparking right now. But that does it for episode 20. Happy 1-year anniversary to us, Samir. I can't believe we're here right now. And to 20 more episodes and 20 more after that.
Hell yeah. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.
See you, everyone.
And my mouse died. Hold on.
I was wondering, I'm like, it still says recording.
I
heard